all sort of gone through it. But basically, well, there's actually not much to say about the annual report. We're really here to hear the questions or any comments that you have and to receive that and to take that back as a group. So I guess the annual report pretty much speaks for itself. And then again, Madam Chair, there's really nothing more that we have to say about it, but really just to leave it now with the councillors for any questions and any comments to both Anthony and myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Are there any questions for the Pacific Advisory Group? It was really good reading your report and it's very helpful. Councillor Matthews.
Welcome, Jocelyn and Anthony, nice to see you. I guess just maybe if you want to just take us through what you sort of consider the big achievement for the year and maybe the biggest challenge that you faced in the last year as an advisory group.
I think we'll start with the challenge. That's always an easy one. So I think that for us, the challenge that we took up, it's not saying it was really bad, but it's one that we took up was trying to create a more of a relationship direct with council and the different groups within council. So within our advisory group, we found that we had a table full of expertise and experience, and in this covered social health, education, governance, policy development, the whole range. And so we thought the best way to approach whatever we could do and contribute is to form portfolios where people could work in and align those portfolios to council's strategy and annual plan. So I think, but to do that effectively, we would have needed to have more of a relationship with the areas within council that actually work in those areas, whether it was youth or policy, etc. So the challenge was trying to create those relationships, and some were successful, and some sort of started, but then nothing happened after. So I think it was more a way of searching how can we actually contribute to council more effectively, because council has a ready-made resource there, and we're not an approval group, and we found we were getting things at the end and say, what do you think? And it's like, well, we're not an approval, and if we had said it's no good or needed work, it probably wouldn't go back to the stage of needing work. So it was more about just trying to enter into the conversations and contribute a little bit earlier, and just give our perspective, which is why council's formed the group. So I guess that was the sort of the challenge part, but we, like I said, we made ground on that, which was really good. In terms of successes for myself, I think the adoption of the capacity strategy, the Pacific strategy, was a real good one. And hearing some of the feedback during the year of how it's working, it's still embedding itself. But again, I think that was a major thing for us. So that's from me. I don't know if our chair has anything further.
We're both of the same mind. The challenges are pretty much the same. It's again, I think we can do better with the relationships within council, how we work with one another, how we communicate with one another, and ideally, we are a great resource that's sitting there. We are within council, we're not external of council. And I think also we believe that we carry a very unique perspective, especially in times such as this, with a very growing Pacific population here in Wellington. Ideally, we would like that to be able to be carried through. And a positive, I think, in the last term as well, was the awareness in the community of the value of the Pacific Advisory Group within council. And in that itself, it also helps council in general when it is engaging with the community. So we believe at the end of this term, because we are coming to the tail end of our term, there is a huge interest in Pacific people within the community to be a part of the advisory group. So I believe democracy services are going to be flooded with a lot of interest of people wanting to sit on the Pacific Advisory Group. So it's really good. Yeah, it's really positive. Thank you.
Thank you, that's really lovely to hear. I've got Deputy Mayor Free and then Councillor Calvert and Councillor Young.
So just thinking about the challenges that we've been through with the COVID pandemic, is there anything you think Council should know that you're able to bring back to us from a Pacific perspective?
Anthony?
Generally, even from your own perceptions of what's happening in your communities.
Yeah. So I do work within the community in my my day job. And sort of the feedback is that the communities have done really well. They're pretty resilient and resourceful with what they've got. Often don't ask for stuff, and it's presumed that they need resources or extra help. So it's quite difficult to sort of draw out what maybe the needs are or how they're feeling. But generally, I think it's been they've been done quite well in terms of the Pacific community. A lot stronger than maybe it's been seen normally. And plus, I think there's been some really good messaging around town about the help and that, and I'm finding that a lot of Pacific communities actually know about that stuff. So whether it's from council or from other agencies, I think it's gone not too bad. Yeah. So it's better than I think a lot of people may think. Yeah.
Can I just add to Councillor Free's question? If there is anything that the pandemic has done for us Pacific people, it's actually made it a lot more conducive for us to be receptive when we come working with government agencies, whether regional or as sort of a more national thingy. But the really good thing that's come out of that is that it's our people are very receptive now. Our people understand the sense of urgency. When there's a need to pull together, we do pull together. And when there's a need for us to listen in a particular way, we do listen. And when there's a need for us to collaborate in a particular way that benefits not just our own selves as specific people, but just the wider community in general, we'll do it. So that's a really good thing to bring back to council. Just given a lot of the work that's streaming out of council right now, the kind of change in awareness as well. It's good.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Actually, that was pretty much the question I was going to ask, but as part of that, I was actually going to just say thank you. I've been on council, this is my 4th year, and I've certainly seen the contribution that your group have made just ever increasing. So I just personally wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pennant.
Tala for Lava, and thank you so much for coming in. And I guess I'm just reflecting that we've had PAG now for many years, and so it's good to make progress going forward. And obviously, approving the some land for the Whale was big. But I guess my question is around what else can we do to give visibility to these issues that your communities are facing, because this council has been very proactive about trying to give voice to communities which don't always have that voice. So obviously there's more engagement we could do, but yeah, just be interested in your thoughts, and also whether you found the Pacific Fora that we used to run helpful, because they were run for a number of years and then they stopped.
Yeah, I think having a Pacific councillor would be one way. But then we have in the Pacific community, they have to understand a pathway to that, and so I don't know whether there could be a pathway for people to learn how to get into these sort of positions in terms of being a councillor, and that, especially young people, as part of their education. But yeah, I guess for Pacific communities, it's they're visual. So when they see someone there, whether it's a councillor and amongst all their stuff, they tend to gravitate to that person and support that, whatever they say. So yeah, it's the presence, I think, within the community rather than even through us as messengers, even though we promote that we're part of council. So I think it's just a direct relationship, if that makes sense. Yeah.
One of the, I believe your question, Councillor, ties in with Councillor Free about how conducive the environment is right now and how receptive our people are right now. If there is anything, we feel more intertwined with society than we ever had, given we've all gone through this COVID-19 together. We walked through it, we came out of it together, and if there is anything that council could do was look at the way in which you engage with our community in general. And I think one thing with our specific people, it's not ideally good for us as well as society in general to be separated from everything else that's taken place. But at the same time, you've got to also acknowledge the uniqueness about us as well as you do Māori, as well as you do our other migrant communities. You know, it's all that diversity, but you just got to acknowledge there are differences there. There are ways in which you can and maybe you should not approach in terms of our people. Just given sort of how we perceive things. And Anthony has brought that up because that is something that's quite heavy in our hearts and something that we will continue when we do finish from PAG, is to work towards getting a Pacific councillor sitting around this table and also Pacific people sitting around the executive table here at council. But at the same time, I think too, when you look at our annual report, we have done work within council and we've also done quite a bit of engagement with our Pacific community. We feel that we have to bridge that thing to help our community open your eyes, make yourself aware that this place is for you, and at the same time to make council aware that you have this tremendous resources sitting in the community. What pathways can you create to be able to bridge that?
Ask a follow-up question. Sorry, I misinterpreted your answer, Anthony, when you said a Pacific Council, and then I was like, oh, what a brilliant councillor. Well, we should have that too, and absolutely. So if you've got any names, give them, and we'll start organising for 2022. And of course, I know Tala cleverly, and I'm very aware that that's been a long time since she's been here. But no, the council idea. Actually, obviously, we've got some navigate our treaty obligations and mana whenua needs, yes. But whether a council of some sort with actually a bit more power than an advisory group would be something that would, just given that Pacific communities have a special role in Aotearoa. Yeah. So would you think that would be, I don't know how we'd do it, I need to think through. I'll get the officers to give me some advice later on.
Thank you. I'm just going to pass over to Councillor Calver. I've had a call from school and I need to just go and check the message, but I'll be back soon. Thank you.
I'll just add just to that as well. I mean, you're trying to think about Pacific communities. The other thing too is that we're grouped as Pacific communities, but within that there's about 20 odd different Pacific groups, and they have their own complexities too, which is sometimes what stops a lot of things happening in terms of strategy and that, because they're not all the same. So having an understanding of the different groups, like there's some stronger islands and there's some little ones, there's ones that are really closely related that might also help to make ground on different things as well. Yeah.
Can I just add on to what Anthony just said? I just know our Pacific Forum, you brought up the Pacific Forum, tremendous value in doing Pacific Forums as they have in previous PAG. One of the things we have not been able to achieve in this term, and given to when you look at our annual report, the sort of the amount of stuff we've been doing and the very little time we've had to do it, we haven't been able to go out and do the Pacific Forums, but that is something that we know has tremendous value. Because we are of the community here within council. So yes, it's a definite thing going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Condi, had a question?
I guess I was interested in this. We often hear about Pacific communities are very resourceful and are unwilling to ask for help. And I guess I'd be interested in your thoughts about how we can go around working with that. And I think some of that is probably about getting the communities involved earlier so that it's more about collaboration and less about help. But I would be really interested in your advice and thoughts on that.
Yeah, you have a really good connection already through your community centres.
Yeah.
Some of them function really well with the Pacific communities, so that's already a strong vehicle there. And it's probably more maybe how to get feedback from them, because I know the Berrimpole one, for example, is really strong and really active with Mirio there. So and even within our group, because Mirio's on our advisory group as well, we get a lot of feedback from the stuff that she does, and that's already a strong thing that council is doing. So maybe more just through the community centres. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that's all the questions. So look, I just, again, thank you very much for your contribution and a very impressive report for the year. And no doubt we'll see you here again in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just before we leave, we'd like to acknowledge and thank our councillors who serve with us on PAG. Our councillor O'Neill. We have a nickname for her, our Supergirl. Councillor Matthews, I just want to really thank you both for your advocacy and your support. A lot of what's sitting in here we would not have been able to do if you did not provide that backbone for us. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, so next up we have the Youth Council, Ella Flavel and Brad Olsen.
Morning.
Welcome both.
Kia ora. Kia ora, ko Ella toko ingoa, and this is... I'm the chair of the Wellington City Youth Council, quite new to it, but we'll go with that. So we only had 2 of us available for Youth Council today, just because it's quite hard for people to come in from school for morning meetings, just maybe for future reference. We could make evening meetings a little easier with the younger members of Youth Council. We'll keep it nice and brief, because I'm sure you've all read our annual report. 2019 was a very big year for Youth Council. We did switch up our work due to the local body elections, but we tried our best. We made a bit of an instructional video on how to vote for young people, and we shared that on our social media platforms. We also engaged with young Wellingtonians through 2 open workshops. One was on planning for growth and the other was on the alcohol bylaw, and we also shared other opportunities through our social media platforms throughout the year. We also did a wide range of consultation with council, although a little less than normal years because of the local body elections. So the highlights were, of course, planning for growth and the alcohol bylaw strategy, which is something we had particular focus on. We also did some external communication, especially with the zero carbon bill, and also the biodiversity strategy. And finally, we did some member development, and we trained our new members, as well as meeting with a bunch of NGOs, government organisations and other speakers such as diplomats. Open to take any questions you guys have.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Simons?
Yeah, I'm just going to comment on ask a question around the comment you made on evening meetings. And can you just unpack that a bit? Because I do feel like it does mean we sort of get skewed, that we always have meetings during kind of the day in school and most people's work hours. So do you want to just comment on what we might do on that and what the benefit would be?
Yeah, so we typically find it's quite university heavy when it comes to speaking and presenting to council, which is not representative of youth council as a whole. And it'll be really great for our school-aged kids to be able to actually come and have their say and, get some practice in speaking to councillors. But they typically can't make it in the morning or during the day, just after 3 o'clock, probably about 4 o'clock would be ideal for them to be able to come in and participate in oral submissions and stuff.
Can I also just add in, it is, if you look at when the advisory groups normally meet, it is normally in the evening, both, not only Youth Council. The other point being, I do believe in a previous council term, this has been brought up at least a few times, noting that if the agenda was a bit more focused on young people, or at least didn't have a huge amount of content, it could be one that could be held in the evenings. And given something like SPC's committee agenda today, it could be something similar, which is relatively limited, could be something to consider for a nighttime one. Look, even just to test it out, sure, it might not work, but at the moment, none of our youth councils can make these ones, so worth considering.
Thank you. Councillor Paul?
Kia ora. I just had a few questions. The first was just around what's your selection process like when you get new members in? Is there a way to ensure that you're getting that good spread of high school aged young people? And just wanted to know what you think about the fact that youth councillors get paid $30 per meeting and all other advisory groups are on $110 per meeting.
Do you want to go?
Oh, you can start.
On the first one, just having been sort of in charge of recruitment for previous years, one of the things that we often find difficult is that as we age up our members, a lot of those who were at high school who you might expect to transition into sort of university, or some of them might leave Wellington, so it's often a little bit hard. There is quite high attrition from young people. That's a fact of life. We do focus very much on trying to get a good range of people. The other thing, of course, is often when people move to university, there are different opportunities that they are seeking, so there's a balance there, I guess, as well. There's more opportunity, if you will, for those at university or outside of high school, if you will, to engage in other ways to communicate and be involved with council or other civic organisations. So I think we're probably pretty comfortable with a bit more of a balance towards high schoolers, because it's not a group that we can often as easily access, but it's something we do keep an eye on. On the pay one, Ella, I'll let you address that one.
Yeah, so this is something that we weren't actually aware of, but we didn't think when we heard about it, when it was brought up at our meeting yesterday, Youth Council agreed that we thought it was something that should be addressed. And anything further on that? Yeah, so
No. Well, we meet 2 times a month. The rest of the advisory groups will meet once a month. So you're getting $60, if you will, versus 110. The economist in me doesn't quite understand that mathematics, but anyway, I do think probably to make the point that Youth Council, to be clear, we're not fussed too much about what we get paid, regardless. It's more that it'd be nice not to be seen as valued as less by council, because council has attached a dollar figure to Youth Councillors' input, and that is less than everyone else. Won't say any more on that.
Quickly note that after our conversation, I've made a formal request in partnership with Councillor Paul and Councillor Day to get this addressed as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Is that all your questions? Yeah. Councillor O'Neill.
Morena, lovely to see you both. I was wondering if you could comment on, you spoke about engagement in the local body elections and getting young people linked in with council. How have you found council's engagements and consultations, and what can we do as a council to make things easier and more accessible for young people?
So Youth Council, we would love to help be able to do things like what we've done in the past. We've done something called a engagement bike, where we biked around and gave out ice lollipops to people who engage with council. But it's also not our job. We're not experts in the field. We're experts in giving our perspective, and that's just Youth Council's perspective, and we're like council to go out of their way to talk to young people that aren't us, particularly because we're definitely not representative of all young people in Wellington. Something that I've actually thought about recently was during many really important things to be consulted on. I'd say go into sports facilities on a Saturday and go talk to young people and really put a focus on that instead of asking Youth Council to do that. And also note that we do have a youth engagement framework that was made in partnership with a bunch of other youth councils across the country back in 2018, 2019, and we'd really love for that to be used from council.
Probably also just to point out, Councillor O'Neill, that officers do come to Youth Council sort of quite early on in the process to get our views, and we have found that quite useful from the point of view of making sure that the right messaging is going out and it is understandable, and I think Council will remember that the last LTP was quite well responded to by young people, which was a positive move. I think moving forward, just making sure that we're, some of the concepts are quite high level from Council. We're talking LTPs, spatial plans and whatnot. It's important to make sure that it is understandable, and I note that a few people around this table, including the chair, were on, I think, the Zoom. There was a youth Zoom call a few weeks back. Things like that are actually quite useful because they do quite quickly break down what's happening. So noting all of Ella's ideas, noting that the current frequency of activity is still quite good.
Thank you. And I'm hoping that with there's a review of advisory groups, so hopefully that question of remuneration will be addressed as part of that in a fair way. So thank you for your contribution. It's very valued, and it's great getting insight into how we do conduct our engagement, in particular with young people. So thank you, and thank you for coming out this morning.
Thank you very much. I'd also just like to say a quick thank you to Councillor Paul and Councillor Day for working with us in the past few months. It's been fantastic. We love having you on board, and we love seeing you at our meetings and being able to talk to you and engage on everything under the sun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so we now have the Accessibility Advisory Group. Tristram Ingham and Rachel Noble. I'm not sure. It's Tristram. It's not here.
Hello, Tristram here.
Oh.
From my wife's Zoom
Oh,
account.
I'm sorry.
We were wondering about the photo.
Where were we? We got him on Zoom? Yeah. He's just, okay, all right. Thank you, Tristram. I've stepped in as chair, so I'm a bit rusty. I will, are you presenting Rachel or was Tristram?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, Rachel? Okay, thank you. Are you back? Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
We're good to go.
The presentation.
I think.
He doesn't have video.
He doesn't have his video set up. No.
Okay, yeah. I think the last year has been quite a good one for our group, actually. We've had a lot more input. We've had Moana and Councillor Matthews more involved. We've had the Mayor visit a few times, but we've managed to elevate the conversation in the direction that we want to be, and trying to turn the conversation more into a strategic one for the long-term future of Wellington City, rather than just being short-term responsive to individual projects, but actually start to paint the picture in the bigger frame of things. So we've really appreciated that. We know that there's still lots of disconnected things happening that we need to work on aligning more and connecting them more, but I'm hopeful that over the next year we'll get there. What else am I going to say? We've had the group, I think, a very passionate group, and I think that represents really the passion that disabled people throughout Wellington have in terms of wanting Wellington to be a great place to live in. And I think communication and so on is something that I'd really love to see it build on over the next years, as well as getting that strategic picture, but just how we communicate with the community and how we get that voice through the planning work that you do here. Over the next year, we've got a lot of things happening, and really internationally and nationally, there's a movement happening in terms of accessibility and disability and inclusion and participation. So it's important that the council not only is involved in that movement, but take the lead role in that movement.
Thank you, Rachel. Does Tristram have anything that you would like to add?
No, I think I just want to add my thanks to Councillor Matthews and the LVLT representative Moana Maki for the fantastic level of support and engagement they've had with the group, and really just say that I guess this recent COVID pandemic has illustrated the real critical importance of having advisory groups that can give insights into specific subpopulation issues, and in fact, through work that a number of our experts on the advisory group have done in the all of government space, it's really highlighted that a concerted sort of program of holistic welfare support and accessibility reform is needed across much of both central and effectively local government as well. And so we really are excited by the opportunities to work closer with council on that. COVID has shown that community resilience is a critical element, and our communities have been really innovative and proactive in forming their own arrangements to try and support each other. And I think there's a really timely opportunity to capitalise on that to get a much greater sort of integrated approach to involving these communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have a question from the Mayor.
Yeah, look, thank you both for coming in and for all your work. My question simply is, looking at the list of the things in your report that you have contributed to, are you being involved early enough and at the right level in those the multitude of different things you were asked to consider?
Depends how you want to take it, really. I mean, we would like to be involved earlier at a more higher strategic level. So, yes, it is good to be involved in those conversations, but we would love to be more involved the next level up with a more strategic approach.
So can you just unpick the difference between the more strategic approach and the level which you are being involved in it? Yeah.
Do you want to respond to that, Chipson?
Yes, I guess for example, the Legacy Wellington Moving project is a really critical long-term investment in infrastructure for the council and the region, and will have critical accessibility implications for decades to come. And council have been fantastically proactive in letting us know the programs going ahead, and that they are committed to integrating accessibility. And so we've been heartened by that level of conversation. However, it's in terms of what ongoing involvement, I mean, how can we as an accessibility advisory group assure ourselves that accessibility is front of mind within the design teams? How can we consider how, in the broader sense, accessibility contributes to employment, to housing plays a role as well, and so it's there sort of have it has wide-ranging consequences that I think our group can actually perhaps help project teams with to integrate things that may not appear in the original scope or constraining thinking on that. So that's one example of a really good one. The mobility parking policy review team is very proactive in coming with those kind of things. But we have a good example is that the parking policy really depends on other things like employment and public transport infrastructure. So we see a role for ourselves in actually helping guide the strategic discussion from accessibility in the sort of a cross department, cross project viewpoint, and that we haven't been involved in any meaningful way.
Yeah, I think if I think about the DHB, obviously because I work in the DHB at the moment, we have influence over all portfolio areas. And I think that the strategic level that we want to be working at is being able to contribute in the early planning stages, making sure the language is right, making sure that we're included. Because by doing that, then the rollout is going to be more beneficial for all Wellingtonians. And I think that where Tristan talked about that strategic influence. So yes, we can help with the technical thing out there, but we need to also have that high level contribution as well.
Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you very much for coming in. And I'm glad you're feeling like you're making some progress and you've got some excellent support, of course. But I would say it does feel a bit like Groundhog Day. I've heard this before. So just in terms of our responsiveness to making sure that we do, elevate your expertise. So first of all, I apologise. I should be speaking slower. You presented a program for change last year and it wasn't adopted. So I guess the question now is, can we get that back on the table? Because I would like to personally see that happen.
We do put it on the table every time we have a meeting. I think where we got to on that was we need to work more closely with some of the officials about how to actually apply it across the council. And probably does need a little bit of resource to do that. We can provide that strategic oversight, but there needs to be someone on the ground who can actually do the application of it. But that plan that we put forward has been helpful in that we've got far more engagement from people than we've ever had before. So I think that the ongoing conversation from that original document, I think it's taking it in the right direction. So hopefully.
Okay, so it'd be good to get some of those to flow through to the forward program, and obviously I'll be supportive. The next question is, we've talked about this before, hugely frustrated that we actually didn't end up with a generic policy document or a strategy on accessibility. Last year we got a transport one. I presume you still would like a generic one? Housing, employment, recreation, access?
They do.
Yeah, okay.
We don't have an option. I think when we talk about climate change, we have to think about accessibility in our community in there.
Yeah.
And it's more than just accessibility, it's about being able to be inclusive and allow all Wellingtonians to participate as Wellingtonians.
Absolutely. So obviously there was supposed to be a complete one that followed on from the first one, but we haven't got there yet. So keen to support Councillor Matthews. Thank you very much for all your work. That's great.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews.
Really, the question I was going to ask, and I think it's kind of been covered off, was about how we would know that we've been successful in embedding accessibility in our work as a council. So I will see if there's anything that either Rachel or Tristram want to add on that. But I also just wanted to thank you both while you're here. That not all councillors might be aware, but we are extremely fortunate to have both Rachel and Tristram nationally and internationally recognised as leaders in their field and are advising governments about what they should be doing. So we are very, very fortunate, and I just want to personally say how much I've enjoyed working with you and learn from you. But yeah, how will we know when we've won?
Good question. And in that plan that we put forward, we suggested that there needed to be a monitoring mechanism built in somehow. So we've never actually had that conversation yet, but it would be good to explore that. One thing we don't do, and that's because nobody does, not even government, is collect data about disabled people. And so I think that's something that if someone start building a mechanism to collect data, that will contribute to the decision-making process.
For me, a couple of metrics of success are critical. That things like when people with disability in Wellington have the same life outcomes as others, when the composition of the council staff is proportional to people with lived experience of disability or other accessibility requirements, when there is no need for an accessibility advisory group because the accessibility culture is so firmly embedded in business as usual that there is no need for independent expert group. So I think we, like other councils and all of government, have still a long way to go. There are some key initiatives, and I think we've put them in our report that really would move the dial for us. Adopting the accessibility charter, having a critical review of the accessibility of local body election process within and accessibility within the council district, etc. etc. The list is long, and your terms great, and I guess we're just sort of here jumping a bit ready to do it. We do feel like we've been spinning wheels a little bit, waiting for this sort of review of accessibility groups or advisory groups to know how best our contribution can be made. So, but we are ready. I just think, for example, that shovel-ready progress from central government has a really massive opportunity for a critical upgrade of the accessibility infrastructure of Wellington. We've said a number of times how with the current maintenance budget, it's going to take, I think they said, over 110 years to upgrade curb cuttings to the current code. There's a number of examples like that where I think we should perhaps use these changing times to actually grabs the ball by the horns and into sort of a big investment in the next long-term plan. So thank you.
Thank you. We've got Councillors Paul, Free and Rush, and I just suggest we try and maybe keep the questions quite succinct and, yeah, keep it moving. Thank you. So we'll go to Councillor Paul.
Kia ora korua. Thank you so much for all of the work that you do. I really appreciate it, especially as someone who has a permanent physical disability, so thank you so much. I recently was talking to Kira O'Regan, who helped produce Hear Me Out, the documentary about Mojo Mathers, and I was just wondering, there was a bit of discussion about local body elections, and obviously this morning we've talked about having representation around the table, so what steps can we take to make our elections more accessible for disabled people?
Oh gosh, it's been a big topic that we've talked about for a long time. The quick answer is that you need to have multiple mechanisms available. That's about accessible information. It's about, I mean, going back to Mojo's bill, that documentary based around, that was to say that it's possible for us to stand. And I think that's been a big thing, is not being able to actually stand as a candidate. Not because we can't stand because there's something saying if you're disabled you can't stand, but more because the system and the structures and everything else just get in the way. And I think Mojo is a good example. When she first started campaigning to be an MP, she would have to get a volunteer to note take all the way through all her meetings, all the engagement meetings. And so now with this bill, it means that an interpreter can be paid for, which means you can actually engage in those discussions. I think that some councils internationally actually have a position which is for a disabled person, whether it's co-opted or something like that. But I think, honestly, to have people with the lived experience in the room as part of the conversation has huge influence. I mean, we see that with youth, we see that with Maori and Pacifica community, but we don't see it very often with disability. So if you really want to go at a high level, then definitely. But making the whole election process, the one thing that candidates never talk about the disability community when they prepare their papers. So we're never actually seen as part of the community, but we are 24% of the population. So it's our visibility, I think, and recognition that we're there. But then there's accessible documents, and then there's the process of actually voting. So electronic voting has been worked on. The Electoral Commission has worked closely with the community for a long time. So I'd say they probably got the best source of information, but I think it's not just about voting, it's about people standing and people coming to the table and opening that, and also for candidates. I know we've got a national election coming up and I'm looking and I haven't seen much yet, but we really look for people who actually show recognition that we as the community exist. And yeah.
Thank you. We'll go on to Deputy Mayor Free. Thank you.
Look, I don't really need to say what I was going to say because I was just going to raise, as Tristan did, the Let's Get Welly Moving process, and I'm glad you've been involved in it. But just to say that, Rachel and Tristan, there's a big consultation coming up in the next couple of weeks, I believe, and so we definitely really need to hear from your community, wider community.
I think it's more than just consulting and hear from the community. You actually need someone at the table understanding and interpreting that information and what it means to be put into policy or into practice. So yes, we need to make sure that we ask the questions in a way that encourages that feedback to come in. I bring that up a lot in the AAG, and the fact that if we don't ask the right question, we won't get the right information. And generally speaking, we don't ask the right question. So I'm quite passionate about that.
Oh, that's really useful. Thank you. We'll think about that very much.
Last one, Councillor Rush. Thank you.
Hello, Rachel. Hearing loss runs through my family, and I'm a little concerned that our focus on the word accessibility perhaps pushes us towards mobility, parking, and those sorts of disabilities, rather than disabilities such as affects my mother and her sisters.
I totally agree. Accessibility does, for some reason, make people think of wheels more, but it's about access to information, access to communication, access to everything else. The group was called Disability Advisory Group, I think, at one stage, and they changed it, and some people in there were holding on to it very tightly. Is it the biggest issue right now? Probably not, because I'd rather get the work program underway.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Oh, yeah.
If I could just add one quick sentence that actually I don't even think accessibility goes far enough. In the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, accessibility is one of the 30 clauses. We're talking about a fully inclusive society, and that word inclusive, I think, is really the heart of where the group is trying to offer advice and work.
Yep. Thank you. Those are all really helpful, important things to share. So, yeah, really appreciate you both coming today to, or joining us as well, not being here. But thank you, Tristram, for joining us on Zoom, and thank you, Rachel, for sharing your experience. It's really good to hear from you and hear what we can be doing better. There's plenty of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ka kite kia koe. All right. Thank you, Lynn. Caden Head, thank you very much for your patience. It's there's been lots of questions, but I think it's really important we get the opportunity to interact with the advisory groups in this way. So I didn't want to cut anything off.
No.
But yeah, thank you very much. So we're really looking forward to hearing about the work that the Environmental Reference Group does. So if you'd like to just do us a little bit of an intro, and then we can ask some questions as well, would be great.
Sure. Firstly, I'm just filling in for the chair. I'm not actually the chair, even though I seem to be here. Lots of council officers do consult with the group, and it's almost got to the point that we're getting very popular. And the last 2 Zoom meetings that I've chaired, one of them, it was just ridiculously busy. We have 2 hours, and we have several large issues that have to be addressed. So we're going to have to try and be a bit more strategic, or basically deal with that issue, because we only meet once a month for 2 hours. And sometimes council officers are very good about giving us pre-reading, and sometimes it's harder because they can't, because, well, there isn't any. It's an up-and-coming issue. Sometimes they present to us on things we could have read. We have to get very strategic in it, and it's not easy. Sometimes we get the information too late, and that's sometimes because the council hasn't approved us to get it. So that is at times an issue. So we get it, when all the decisions have been made at the same time as council, and actually, yes, we can do a formal submission like everyone else in the public, but in a way it's too late. So yes, it's very busy. I won't say a lot. Good performance indicators, knowing how you succeeded is very important in absolutely everything. So often it's at the end of a report or a strategy, or, we're going to measure it in this way. I think it needs to be, it's really important. We really want the reference group review to be finished. I think it's been about a year. Yeah, and the Environmental Reference Group it's probably 2/3 new members since then. We're having to work slightly differently, partly because we're so busy and COVID, etc. So half the information I think we gave them was probably even out of date, but we need that finished. Even if you short circuit it and just tell them to just, I can't see why it can't be finished. We'd like to thank Councillor Gilbert, because he was representative, as on previous council, and he was fantastic. We felt very well informed, and he would ask for information and help when he wanted it to fulfil his job, and that was great. He said, I need to know more about such and such, can you do me a summary? And that was great, and we're really enjoying our current councillors, and as I said yesterday, you're almost welcome, and we'd really like to have you.
We also like to thank Moana, who also keeps us informed and also keeps us on track, and also David's support. We'd also like to thank our large number of democracy advisors. They have changed. Well, I put a list in, and I think I actually forgot one. Like, poor Heidi had to say to me, look, I've lost all the documents, like, you know, all the old submissions, etc. Can you see what you can find for me? One of them said, look, we can't get into Lumio, we've lost the password. You know, we need this administration to be a bit better. So we're hoping Heidi stays, so make sure you pay her properly.
Good call. Thank you.
And basically, I think that's probably all I need to say. Have a look at the brief bios in the report, and you can see who's currently on it. There's a huge wealth of expertise in there, so use this.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Some very clear messages. We're seeing some themes across the advisory groups. We'll start. We've got questions at the moment from councillors Rush, Fitzsimons and Calvert. So, Councillor Rush.
I think you actually went on to answer. I was interested to understand whether a common theme we've been hearing is a desire for early engagement, and I think at one point you suggested that you did get early engagement, but at other times not so. So, if you want to just
That's
confirm.
correct. Sometimes we get very early engagement and it's great. Like the cemeteries engagement we got right at the beginning. She said, you know, I've got to look at this. These are what I'm thinking. And we were able to quite quickly give her back a whole lot of, you know, remember this, remember that, remember this. Other things, it comes to us quite late. And it's just a lot harder to feed in.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yeah, I'm interested in your role as an advisory group, and I know we're getting a review of them, and this is just a since you're here question. But the other advisory groups are sort of population based, so they're sort of trying to compensate for something we don't have around the table in a population sense. Whereas you sort of come from a more kind of overarching, environment perspective, and I just wondered if you could touch on whether you think that that's appropriate and why. And whether we should expand them out to have other areas like transport, I would say housing, you probably would disagree, but those sorts of kind of areas, as opposed to treating environment differently to a whole range of others, which are population based, which you've heard this morning obviously.
Well, environment is all encompassing. Like, our role is to best ways to improve Wellingtonians' quality of life. So it does cover a huge range of fields, but they're also very interrelated. So your housing and your transport are clearly interrelated. Fresh water, your stream health is clearly interrelated with your stormwater, your sewage leaks, your housing, your transport. They're very interrelated. So I think separating them off would add to the council's already siloed system. So I think it's better to have them combined. It's a tricky one, because it does mean that really 2 hours once a month isn't enough. But I definitely wouldn't separate them. I think there's enough separation happening.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. And it's just really following on the same vein as Councillor Fitzsimons, because I noticed when you presented yesterday for the annual plan, it was an encompassing almost submission. There was connections to transport and how we lived and that. And it's probably following on, knowing how the accessibility advisory group, and they comment that they're often referred to as used for their technical knowledge, as opposed to sort of coming in from a strategic approach. And I wonder whether you feel, from an environmental reference group, that you're being asked to be the technical advisors for council, when perhaps there should be a different level?
Actually, I think we often are more strategic than technical. like they interweave a bit. But we try to be strategic. We try to do all our submissions at a reasonably high level. But sometimes you do have to get down to the detail. So no, I don't think, we simply don't have time to give detailed technical stuff.
Yeah. So do you think there's, I mean, given what you're commenting on and given what's coming out of council, do you think we have enough staff or the right staff on board in terms of being able to provide that environmental advice? Because what we do hear from a lot of people, and they come with their qualifications. I'm not talking about the environmental reference group, but we hear from submitters, and they quote various things, but we don't know which are the sometimes always the proven experts or the experts in the field.
Well, your staff should be able to help you with that. You know, they really should. You're in any of these fields, you should have the staff on board in council, and in some sections you do, others perhaps less so. That should be able to actually help you with that. They should be able to say, well, to some extent. And when you're reading through your submissions in advance, you know, if I was one of you, I would be going back to staff and saying, look, I'm really interested in this submission. They refer to these 6 bits of information, research, or can you tell me, you know, are these real, are they valuable? Because obviously there's a limit to your time too.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's all the questions this morning. Thank you so much, Lynn, for coming in and talking to us. Very interesting and very helpful. So, and thank you for the work that you do. It's obviously quite a full process for 2 hours.
Probably the other thing is, I think daytime meetings, you know, they are tricky.
Yeah.
You know, it just means I have to flip my own work into the evening. And actually, to be honest, I'd rather flip your meetings into the evening.
Yeah, well, actually, we talked at Youth Council yesterday, and unfortunately I missed their presentation, but we talked about making sure that these annual report meetings particularly also can be, we can't always do all meetings in the evening for various reasons, but there's no reason we can't be more flexible at times. So
end of day, sort of 5:30, 5 o'clock is also quite useful because
people going home from work.
Yes, and it doesn't interrupt your
I think it's worth having a conversation about.
Yeah.
Just make the observation that originally when we set up the structure we started off with the council meeting at 5:30 to allow people the option of the.
But it's probably this one as well. At times it would be good if we did, even if every so often we do it, so that in particular, if there's particularly high interest from the community, that we are accessible. I think it's a very good point. Thank you so much. What we're going to do, councillors, is morning tea, but I think we're just going to try and get through doing this paper quickly because I'm not anticipating there'll be lots of debate, but I know that we've got our people here listening. So first of all, I just have to reorder the papers. So in accordance with Standing Order 19.1, I'm going to reorder the papers to be that we do item 2.2 first, which is the advisory group annual reports, and then item 2.1. Take a second after that. No, I'm just papering that. Okay, so now I'm going to invite Councillor Matthews to introduce the report for the advisory group annual reports.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Neill is going to second. I'll speak very briefly. I think many of the issues have been covered. I just want to thank all the members of the advisory groups and in particular the chairpersons for all of their work. For me, working alongside or, you know, having a connection to all of the advisory groups, but particularly working with the Accessibility Advisory Group is one of the most fulfilling aspects of my job. And, you know, it's a real privilege to be able to directly hear from disabled people about their experiences and to help transmit those throughout the organisation. These groups bring the community directly to us, and I think the example of the Whale Malai and the advocacy of the Pacific Advisory Group, you know, made that such a more complete experience for the council and helped inform councillors to make the decision. I guess, you know, then it's our job to listen and be responsive to those communities, and I guess to sort of think beyond consultation to, you know, co-design and to sort of embedding that sort of strategic viewpoint in the work that we do. They don't always function perfectly, and we can do better as an organisation, in my view, to value and support our advisory group. I've seen where effective partnership between the members of the group and the chair, the very able and ongoing support of democracy services, active participation from an ELT member, and also an active councillor advocate kind of work together to make that, these groups function well. And I think that is an essential kind of team-based approach to the success of these advisory groups. The long-awaited review, which I understand is now going to be early September, but I'll, continue to be having conversations about that, will give us some indications about what we can do better. There's also, we have to acknowledge that there's calls in the community for other groups. I personally have been having discussions with the Rainbow community about, their ability to participate more fully in the work of our council and our city, and I know that there's similar calls from ethnic migrant communities to also be more directly involved. But I am concerned that, if we do that we do need to resource that work, that we can't do more with less or more with the same, that these people are, to be able to contribute and help change us and help us be better, that work needs to be supported. So just the potential and power for the advisory groups to make us all more effective as councillors and as an organisation, and how much we respond and support to that is, up to us, and I'm very committed to doing that, and I appreciate all of the support that councillors give to the advisory group, all of the work that our officers do, but particularly for those people themselves, for the gift they give us.
So succinct, and I don't think anyone will have anything to add to that because you've just covered it all. I had a few notes, I'm like, yep, you covered that. So well done, and thank you for your leadership in that area too, and thank you, councillors, for your good questions today. I think it's really important that we give that, what it deserves to have that interaction. Councillor Calvert, would you like to?
Yeah, I would like to.
Oh, sorry, I need to give Councillor O'Neill the chance to speak if you'd like to now. Sorry about that. Yes.
I think the advisory groups do an excellent job for us, but they have referred to the review, and that review's been probably going at least for about 18 months, and it keeps dragging on. And as we know, there's been a change in membership in some of those groups. So what they gave feedback previously is may not even be relevant in these. Things have changed a lot in 18 months. So I think that it needs to be some importance placed on this review, and for this paper to come back to council at some point, or this committee. We seem to sometimes allow other subsequent work that pips the post on some of these things that have been going on for a while, and almost I wonder whether there's a bit of rework now required. And I will speak up for the ethnic communities. We have a multicultural council, which the mayor formally appoints council members to, but they're not classed as an advisory group, and I'm not saying that the multicultural council should itself be a formal advisory group, but we do have a very broad ethnic community, whether they're from refugee backgrounds or other backgrounds, and it's really important when we're developing our services and our strategies that they have a voice, because we need to make sure that Wellington is a place for everyone, all the people that are here. So I'm using this opportunity just to reinforce that we need to make sure that we've got a coordinated effort around here, because I know some business units have a resource based on multicultural folks, and I think even the libraries have got one. So we need to lift that up. So this review for the advisory groups is well overdue, and I suspect it may well have to sort of maybe even go slightly back to the drawing board. But thank you again to all those advisory groups that have committed to making this place a better place.
Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I agree with Councillor Calvert's points that the advisory groups do an awful lot of good work for us. But I would remind councillors that we are elected as representatives of our community. I may not be disabled, but as you heard, hearing loss runs through my family. I may not be gay, but I know plenty of blokes I've played rugby with in San Francisco who are, and I have a family member who's also gay. I may not be young, but I used to be. And I have 2 little kids. So I think there certainly is a place for the special advisory groups, but it's not an opportunity to devolve our responsibilities as elected officials.
Councillor Pennant.
I got to speak after Councillor Rush because I'm going to disagree politely. Look, I just want to say thank you to obviously to the advisory groups, and there's a lot of really talented people in there, which is fantastic. We need to make as much use of them as possible, and obviously we've got talented colleagues who are doing a great job of working with the group, so thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. I am going to present a contrary view to Councillor Rush, not for the first time. This really does feel like Groundhog Day for me, to be honest. I've heard this for the last decade. A lot of what the comments were made, and I kind of think my position would be, just particularly through the chair, Councillor Matthews, is that rather than doing yet another review, and like the ERG seems to struggle about its function and all the rest of it, is whether actually groups need to be given a bit of power to do some stuff, rather than, so whether an advisory group model is the best model is actually would be my question, and maybe what would be more helpful is for them to be some more project work that comes off our Forward program that people could really get their teeth stuck into, that would feel more meaningful, and we need to be held to account too. I mean, I struggled a long time ago to get the first accessibility action plan through. We did that, it was a bit weak. So that was in 2012. So we're now at 2020. We still haven't got the next iteration of it. It hasn't come through. And I'm not quite sure what happened there, but it just didn't happen. And also on Pacifica issues too, whether we are giving enough visibility, and I know there's obviously some complex issues, Councillor Paul was just advising me, when we've still got a lot of issues to deal with mana whenua, but I just think we probably do need a bit of a rethink, and that's not through the review process, but actually at this table, about how we can make more use of all these talented people, so that we can, and we actually measure if we are making a difference in these really important areas. And I think I would suggest that we sort some of that stuff out before setting up another group, just to make sure that possibly we take whatever we've learned from this and to maybe do a little bit differently. So that would be my thought. But obviously I am grateful for the fact even that people will turn up and give the perspective is really valuable. Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill, would you like to speak now?
I thought I would just briefly speak, and that was to acknowledge the kind of uniqueness and the privilege that we have to have these people sitting at our table here and presenting. For me, this report is an annual plan. It's a celebration of a lot of the fantastic work that people have done, and just on my short time being able to work alongside a few other advisory groups to really understand the different values and the unique opportunity and the challenges and the way that my own mind has been opened up. And one thing that's come up with this review, I've consulted with the review as a member of an advisory group and now as a council, and something that comes up is increasingly the value of our wonderful democracy services people. And Jocelyn called me a superstar, but what happens behind closed doors is the amount of praise that Sean gets, and he's just fantastic, and the dedication and attention to detail. Sorry, Rush, not you. But just to really celebrate, that's something external to council that I found the most valuable experience is having access to direct democracy and our staff in that way in ELT too. And then the second thing that always comes up in our review is the practices and the ways in which we enhance and value and the mana of people. And I think that's come quite consistently, is that often there's a break between expectations or values in those kind of ways, and the way that we lift people up can we value their voice or their connection to their community, and that is a fantastic opportunity in this review as well. And I'm very excited, and looking back over the last 6 months, there's no better councillor that I think has done a better job than Councillor Matthews, because I know that she fights and she spends so many hours outside of her regular schedules meeting with all different groups. So I'd like to thank you in that as well.
Paul.
Sorry, I'll keep it brief. I know we want to get on with the day, but I just wanted to say, yeah, I do, as the liaison for the Environmental Reference Group, I do find it a bit confusing because obviously, like, I've got the climate change portfolio and we've got our sustainability team, soon to be a climate change manager, Parks, Sports and Rec, and then you add on all the advocacy groups like Gen Z, 350, like you add it all on, like it's an awful lot to consult, which is our job obviously, but like, yeah, I guess it's about giving them something meaningful and purposeful to do. But also, at what point do we reorient the membership, or do we actually look at the groups that we have? So for example, with Youth Council, there, you know, quite a lot of them are students, and now you look around the table and you've got 2 people who have recently graduated. So when do we, and you know, like we're talking about people being represented on council, so at what point do we look at our membership and think, actually, that representation is here, now let's move on to other groups that also need our support, such as, you know, multi-ethnic groups or LGBTQIA plus groups. And I just really wanted to say quickly, Sean, like sorry, Councillor Rush, having people that, you know, you know, you say you represent those communities and you've got gay friends and everything, it's just not the same. And like, it, you know, like I personally didn't feel represented here, and so I stood for council, and like having people that say, well, I represent people in my community, belong to these communities, it's just like, it's just not the same thing. And Pag was saying it as well, like for them it's about seeing themselves represented around the table more than it is feeling like someone necessarily represents them because of some friends that they have or a perceived experience that they think that they can empathise with. It's different to a lived experience, so I just wanted to say that really quickly.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak very briefly. I totally all those sentiments that we may know people, but we don't know what it's like to walk in those shoes. And I too have a parent that is in a wheelchair, but I don't really know what it feels like to be in the wheelchair. So I can only have a certain amount of understanding. So I think it is really important that we do have these advisory groups. And I think it's important to acknowledge that they each do have a different function. They are slightly different. And I think the review is really important. I'm really pleased that Councillor Matthews has said that it's coming back. I don't think we need to go back to the drawing board. Yes, the membership may have changed, the review may have taken a long time, but the feedback will probably still be quite what we've heard today. You know, there's some issues around early engagement and all those sorts of things. But and I just want to speak to the Youth Council example with Councillor Paul. Yes, we do have you know, young people now who are in your age group, but there are college students there, and they can't vote, and they don't have any way of having a voice in the city if we don't provide a way of coming in. But maybe we need to change some things about that to make it really representative, which, you know, is a bit of a challenge. But I also do want to acknowledge the work of Democracy Services, because in my time on council, what I have seen really helps an advisory group to be able to work well is that good support and connection with ELT. And obviously councillors being there is important, but when they have access to the information they do through Democracy Services, that makes such a difference. So really want to acknowledge the advisors. And thank you, Councillor Matthews, for the role that you're taking overseeing it. Councillor Matthews at the last minute yesterday joined the Youth Council meeting to talk about the issue around the discrepancy of pay between Youth Council and the other advisory groups. And I really appreciate you stepping in like that, but also understanding your role to be able to advocate to Council for that. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And you can do a right of reply now if you like. There's no one else on the list.
Be very brief, because you did say some of the things I was going to say, Jill, but you know, even in this short debate where there's kind of little controversy, it is difficult, because some of you say there shouldn't be a review, some of you said the review was too slow, but also we should redo it. So I think redoing it is going to make it more slow. But you know, the fact is, you know, it's before my time, but I have inherited this review, and it is going to give us information that we can use that come directly from people involved to inform our decisions going forward. And that doesn't mean, you know, we will have the opportunity to discuss and look at how we want to shape this work going forward, and we will also, very importantly, have the opportunity to discuss the paper within the advisory groups and give that feedback for all those people that are currently there and contributing. So I look forward to doing that. I have been doing my bit to hurry along this process. You know, COVID was a factor in the delay here, but I, you know, want to just come back and once again again thank these people for they give way more of their time than we recompense them for, and we don't, and any kind of small financial contribution could never fully recognise the expertise and wisdom, lived experience, and community that these people give us. So thank you.
Thank you. What we're going to do now is vote on that. So I'll now put that motion to the vote. So voting's open. Very efficient. We all must need morning tea. And that's unanimous. So what we'll do is we'll now break till we'll have 10 past 11. So if you come back after that, thank you. So we're going to get straight on to item 2.1, which is the proposed Wellington City Council solid waste bylaw. And I would like to invite Councillor Foon to introduce the paper.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I can say that introducing the proposed WCC solid waste bylaw adoption for public consultation is greatly welcomed. I do want to thank officers for all the work they have done over the many years to bring this paper to the table, but not only that, for working collaboratively with the other 7 councils in our region to get the consistent bylaw that you have in front of you today. I'd like to thank Councillor Pannett also for all your work. I know that you've been carrying this along for years, but also for seconding the paper today, and I know that you'll bring your perspective. The reason for the solid waste bylaw review, well, we must be compliant with our requirements in respect to the Local Government Act and the Waste Minimisation Act and more. This paper is due for review in 10 years. But also what is significant about this paper is that this is the first time the bylaw has applied waste minimisation opportunities, and we have worked as a region to gain consistency. And this is where there are many benefits to be gained by having the same messaging throughout the region, both at a professional level for all of the other businesses that are working with us, but also to address behaviours consistently. So as my dear colleague Councillor Condi always says, what is the problem we are trying to solve? And so some of the issues, I'd like to bring up here. We have unmarked rubbish being left on our city streets that is costing ratepayers around $150,000 per annum. And so what we're asking for is collectors to have identifiable receptacles so that we can assess where the rogue waste is coming from and look to stop that. The waste being produced by the construction and demolition industry is by far the highest in the region, with 525,000 tonnes being reported going to class 2 and 4 landfills. And just to give you a sense of that, what we take in at Wellington City landfill, Southern landfill, is 100,000 tonnes per annum. But the trouble with all of this waste coming from C&D is that we actually don't have any idea of the types that are being produced, where it is coming from, and so therefore we can't properly identify where the diversion opportunities are. So what we are requiring is licensing for all these businesses that are working in this area, but also for the purpose to be able to collect data so that we can work with the industry on the way forward and diversion. We're asking for waste plans for new developments. We all know that Wellington is growing and that the building is escalating. So new developments over 2 million, we're asking if we can, that they will bring a waste minimisation plan to us so that we can work with them on diverting as well. Events are another one, are also producing high amounts of waste. And the bylaw is asking for waste minimisation plans from them also to be produced prior to the event so we can work with them and support them by leading them to the right services to support that. And I'm sure we don't need to bring up paper articles with plastic spurted all over the stadium, the aftermath of homegrown, but really we've seen that our other festivals like Newtown Festival have diverted up to 70% of waste, and it makes the festival one of the most popular in the region, and the community get in behind and they love it. Personally, I'm only going to the events that have that kind of waste servicing around them. And of course, we need to review the waste management systems in our multi-unit dwellings, the ones that are not only the ones that are existing, but particularly as we grow, we're asking for waste planning and better management and more efficient management systems in any new developments. And this comes around providing space, because basically at the moment the developers are not required to provide space for waste minimisation services. And what that means is that it's ending up with us picking it up off the road. So why do we need to use the bylaw to minimise waste? All over the country, our landfills are filling up, and as you know, Wellington is no exception. There is actually nowhere for our waste to go, and as we heard yesterday, many of our residents want us to do this. And waste was one of the strongest concerns of New Zealanders of the Colmar-Brunton Better Futures report. The consumption and throwaway nature is the result of the climate emissions, Council's own profile at 83.8%. This means we are paying up to $2 million on ETS fees, and our officers are working on the assumption that this will go to $10 million per annum in 10 years if we don't reduce our waste habit. So it is our role to help our community reduce that fee. And let alone the impact that our mountains of waste are causing, extending our landfill into encroaching a significant natural area, but also the impact it has on our waterways. So that's the downside, but actually there are big opportunities. We have to remove our organic and food green waste from landfill, which we also heard about yesterday, which accounts for 26% of our waste. And so many of the amendments that are being brought to you today, so there are a few amendments, but are intended to support initiatives like this. I want to also acknowledge the bylaw is not the silver bullet. It is one of the prongs that we've got to help change the system and behaviours ahead of us. So I would like to point out the amendments that we've brought through today. Many of them are around supporting composting, creating space for composting facilities, supporting events further and being specific around plans, and also really being specific about what should be sorted prior to coming to Wellington landfill because recycling is available, because many of that is just going over the tip face and straight to landfill at this point. So, okay, so there are a few amendments here. I don't really want to go through them one by one unless you really want me to. I'm happy to speak to them perhaps in the right of reply. Does anyone need further time to read through the amendments? They have been circulated. Great. So just to wrap up with that, I will just thank you all in advance for supporting this regional work, to support Wellingtonians, to provide better and more efficient and effective waste management systems, provide more opportunities to support waste minimisation and reuse our resources, and provide a safer, more hygienic and service. So yeah, kia ora tātou and thank you. Thank you to the officers.
And I understand, Councillor Pennant, that you're seconding, and I'm sure you'd like to say a few words about this.
I've quite a lot to say, so thank you very much. And look, actually, I'm feeling quite emotional about this because it has been a long journey, and we did say we were going to get stuff done, and this is one of the things that we are going to get done, so that's fantastic. Look, colleagues, we have the dubious pleasure of being one of the worst performers citywide for us in the OECD for waste performance. We are bad, and this is not about the actual active management of the landfill, but in terms of the way that we create and dump waste, we are not good. And even I would go as far to say as the waste system in this country is broken. Unfortunately, even though the Waste Minimisation Act was passed in 2008, nothing significant has happened since that passing, and it's only now that we're going to get some change. So the waste levy's gone out for consultation and so on. There will be container deposit legislation, there will be product stewardship, but there are some very, very significant problems. So this is one of the really first tangible steps that we are putting through to fix this very broken system. So I'd like to say thank you to a lot of people because I think it's really important because this is a huge piece of work. Laurie, one of the best things, about that election was you getting elected because you're such a great champion on waste and you're doing such a great job of leading. So thank you so much for being here and for doing that work. Councillor Paul, of course, my good friend, has been a fantastic champion for climate change, and so, it's good, always that climate change lens on every bit of documentation that we have. I'd like to also thank Councillor Matthews and Councillor Fitzsimons for just challenging me some stuff around, more from that Labour perspective, around privatisation, and which is why it's changed my mind on a few things. My colleagues on the Waste Governance Group were amazing to work with. They were so great, and that's how we got our waste plan through. I'd like to give a huge thanks to the officers. Yay! Okay, so Emma and Emily have been amazing. Emma's got that really academic brain that can just sort through complex things like bylaws, and Sherilyn, of course, who's done a great job. Emily unfailingly gives me great advice and has deep knowledge around the operational aspects of our work. Same, of course, for Mike Mendonça, who's not here, I don't think, but thank you to that. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the work of Rod Boys, who's now with MFE. He was amazing, such deep knowledge about waste, and so I'm very grateful. And Duncan Wilson, too, from Unimea, who did the work for our waste assessment, so really, really fantastic. So basically, what happened, colleagues, is 2011, the first regional waste plan came out, and unfortunately, due to a lack of political will and the times, it wasn't that ambitious. And so when we gathered again to do another one starting from 2015, we decided we wanted to do better. And we came up with a very powerful, hopefully, vision, which is waste free together, very quickly too, actually, because we wanted to have something really aspirational. Light reading, absolutely. And so we went through a big process to do our waste assessment so that we've got really, really good data about where our waste is coming from. And saying that, I'll say this particularly for Councillor Condi, because we don't have a good data management system and the commercial operators won't tell us, there are gaps in that data, but it's not pretty reading, basically. And then, of course, we got the waste management and minimisation plan, reducing our waste by a third. So that is fantastic. There is a step change, but I will say, because there's no media here, that you might argue this is a lowest common denominator plan, because if it had just been Wellington City, it would have been more ambitious, to be honest. People are at different places on the waste journey. I am unapologetically supportive of regulation in this space. It is needed. Going to the private market has failed, which is why we've got so many big problems. Even this council could have possibly, over the years, we should have done some more thinking around how we regulate and how we design our cities so that we can reduce waste. The figure, I think, which should give us the most shock is the figures by weight over where the waste comes from. So 76% of it from private wheelie bins. So in other words, the people who are using the council service, while we might not all be doing ideally, we are not contributing the most waste. And really, I think Wellingtonians are very concerned about waste, and I think that would be one thing, is come back to us. Come back and use I know they're plastic bags, but come back to us, because that is one of the ways we will get our waste down. And then this really is important work. The fact that we are getting a licensing system for our operators is amazing. It's really, really, really significant, because as I said, privatisation hasn't worked. We need to control these people. They just go. You make a lot of money in waste, and so it's good when people dump, and we need to stop that. And one of the reasons I supported this so strongly, is that we will be able to dictate how big your rubbish container is if you want to contract with us. And we're not going to let people have a 240 litre rubbish bin, I would hope. What you do need, though, is space for organics and for recycling, although even that's a little bit problematic. The junk mail provisions are great. As we know, we get a lot of waste through junk mail. We don't need it. There's no, you can go online these days. This construction and demolition, Councillor Fitzsimons has been strong on this. I was asked why was I so obsessed with C&D, and I'm like, this is a huge global issue. Like 50% of our waste globally will come from C&D. It is a big, big issue, and because we don't regulate the class 2 to 4 landfills, we are getting stuff dumped that shouldn't be. I'm going to be looking at amendments over this. I didn't want to propose them for today, but I think there probably are a few things which could be strengthened. If you look at the wording quite carefully, Councillor Flynn, to chair, it says you may require a plan, and we may require you to do this. Actually, we need to say you're going to do this. If you've got a $2 million plus project, you need to do a plan. The event management stuff, look, I was a bit sceptical about that. Ms Richardson slightly convinced me otherwise. I think it's more symbolic. I'm not sure it's the biggest generator of waste in our region, but nevertheless, it's highly visible, and it is a way to educate people. I will just make the point, officers have agreed to remove the wording around inappropriate building design. I think that would rack people up. The reason that we've now got, Councillor Fitzsimons will be speaking to this, we have got a problem now is because council failed to regulate. If we had said to people, and I know it was raised by a previous staffer, you have got to design your building in a particular way so that someone can get a truck in to pick up rubbish, we wouldn't be having such a problem now. So I don't want inappropriate in there. I expect that there will be feedback on the 6 a.m. pickup along arterials. As our constituents will know, in Pukekohe, Lambton, rubbish trucks are quite noisy, and so if that's all over the city, people might come back to us with some feedback. And just lastly, I will own this. What I realise now, this bylaw is very Pākehā orientated. It needed an Indigenous lens on it. And I think what I also realised is, and again, why we've got a problem now, which Councillor Fitzsimons will be speaking to, is that we didn't do any policy work. And usually we would do the policy and then the bylaw, but we've only got a bylaw. So the policy work probably needed to be done to sort out some of those major issues around different cultural perspectives, different service levels and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, the fact that we have got 8 councils to possibly agree to a bylaw is amazing, and I want to thank everyone again and look forward to the debate.
Councillor Paul.
Hey, awesome. Hey, just want to say a big thank you to you, Councillor Foon, Councillor Panic, everybody that's contributed. Big thank you to Moana and Mike for just all of the work and just being awesome officers to get to work with. I'll just say I've got my call amendment has been incorporated in there. It's number 15. It's about giving over information and data about emissions. So we want to make sure that those trucks are handing over that information so we can prepare our CMARS report, which is our carbon emissions management and reduction scheme. So that's a kind of that's pretty important, I think. And yeah, I just wanted to talk briefly. Councillor Pennant touched on the fact that you'll be coming back with further amendments when it comes back around. So will I. Actually, one of my first interactions with council was when I was the president of Vic Uni last year, the students, and I got a lot of angry emails when there were a further. I don't know how many streets it were that were added onto that blacklist that don't automatically receive recycling bags, and a lot of angry emails saying, these are your students that mean that we can't recycle anymore, so you need to go and sort it out. But I was obviously like, I don't even know where to start. So hopefully that's something that we can address, and my colleague, Councillor Pannett, might disagree with me and believes that students are privileged and can read and should be able to investigate that, how to recycle properly themselves. But I would argue that when you're living in really crappy rentals, when you are on a minimum wage and working your butt off, as well as possibly being part of not the most compassionate university in the world, recycling is not at the top of your priority list. Neither is proper waste disposal, and it's pretty inaccessible if you don't have a lot of money. So I think it's important that we don't put too much of this onto personal responsibility. We need systemic change as well. Millions of mothers, Alicia Hall, I was talking to her earlier in the triennium, and she said, so much of this personal responsibility around waste falls onto women. Mothers, they're expected to be the ones that do all of the zero waste and the recycling and the sorting on top of everything else. So I think though there is a degree of personal responsibility, we too have a responsibility for some of that systemic change. So just flagging that I'll be back looking at the blacklisted streets, getting our central city recycling again. No, that's not the silver bullet, but it is part of the solution. So yeah, just want to flag that, and thank you for your incredible work.
Kia ora. Yes, Councillor Fitzsimons, do you want to put?
Thank you. I just want to start by thanking Councillor Foon for her incredible work on waste. I have the pleasure of going to lots of meetings in the Southern Ward with Councillor Foon, and she has actually inspired me and many others in the community to on waste, to the degree that last night when my partner asked me to pick up McDonald's on the way home, I found an alternative option for him, given that I was giving her a ride home. But I have actually seen her really genuinely inspire people into changing the way they do things, and I think that as a councillor, if you can achieve that even in a small way, you've already achieved something really substantial. I guess just I want to introduce this amendment, and really, look, as a councillor, like all of us around the table, I get residents who come to me a bit grumpy at times about the service they're getting from the council or changes that the council are proposing, and we all try our best to influence the operational arm of the council to make sure that the services can be, as resident focused as possible. And I always say to residents when they raise issues with me, look, I can't promise you the outcome you want, but I can promise you that I will raise it and try and get you an answer or the outcome. And I guess that we don't have the ability appropriately as governors to influence the operational nature of the council. But when these decisions come to this table, that is our chance to do that. So this is the chance that we have to set the boundaries of the way that the operations of the council function. And I just want to be clear that this bylaw will be a step backwards for residents in multi-unit dwellings because it does take away an existing service for them. I think that rubbish collection is a core council service, and I really worry that residents in multi-unit dwellings won't be aware of the proposals contained in this bylaw, and that they won't necessarily kind of do anything about it or understand its implications until the council attempts to engage with them to develop the kind of plan and use their discretion on the operational considerations for the exemption. So I want to make sure that every resident who in a multi-unit dwelling who currently has a service continues to get that service. And I think if we remove it as this bylaw proposes, it will be a real kick in the guts for those residents, and it's the sort of decision that gives the council a bad name. We are taking away an existing service that is really important to people, and I would really like us to today take the decision not to consult on the removal of the service in multi-unit dwellings, and make sure that those people who do rely on the service and have relied on it for years and years in some cases continue to get that service. The bylaw does propose that existing multi-unit developments all be responsible for their own private waste and recycling with an exemption process. I'm very concerned about the exemption process. I'm concerned that what it does is skew the power in favour of the council at the expense of residents. So it puts a whole lot of ability for the council to use its overwhelming power to stop the residents getting these services. Now, this amendment does not have officer support. In fact, it's opposed by officers, and the reasons for that are we heard on Tuesday, but also they're reflected in the earlier amendment and in the existing bylaw, and those are around operational reasons. And I just want to be really clear that we're only talking about existing services which have been functioning operationally in some cases for many, many years. So although there may be particular issues that the council finds difficult or frustrating or aren't even working, this is not about new operational requirements. And my message in passing this amendment is to say those operational matters need to be worked through, and we need to find different ways to do it if they're so bad. And I guess in terms of health and safety, particularly for workers, I understand that we must make sure that health and safety for workers, we've got huge legal responsibilities there, but those legal responsibilities apply no matter what the bylaw says. And the role of the council, if this bylaw passes, will be to work through those operational requirements, not simply to take away the service, which is the thrust of the existing bylaw. And I think, that's really all I wanted to say at this time, and I understand Councillor Calvert is seconding.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert, would you like to speak now? If you can.
I will reserve my right.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a few people on the list. We've got Deputy Mayor Free, Councillor Foon, Councillor Pennant and Councillor Matthews. So we'll go with Deputy Mayor Free and Condi.
Look, I won't be supporting this because I do think that we need to take officer advice on this matter quite seriously. And although, I think I can understand the argument that these services have been delivered, but we also know in some cases they've been problematic. And we've had some deaths and we've probably had some near misses that we don't even know about. So I think, rubbish collection. Yes. A while ago, admittedly, but it's not just our council. There have been deaths across the country, and I think if we're getting advice that our officers are concerned on an operational level, that actually needs to be respected. So look, I think that the officers, from what I saw, were happy to amend the grandparenting time from 2 years to 5 years. I didn't have a lot of time to look at it. I think that is a concession, and I think to amend it to the period of the bylaw is simply just kicking it down the road. It's actually saying we're not actually prepared to amend it. We're just going to keep it the same and let another council deal with it when they come to look at the bylaw next time. So I think if you're going to be serious about making some changes, and we do know waste is an issue, I was very concerned when this first came to us, when basically the proposal at that point was just to simply stop the service for units. I think it was a multi-unit dwellings of 8 or more. I think it was 8 or more at that point, and simply cease the service. I think a huge amount of work's been done in the meantime to look at how this can be grandparented and accommodated, and our staff can work with these situations to make some provision for waste. But I think that to just say that we're going to keep the bylaw the same, really, we're not going to implement anything differently until the new bylaw comes, I can't support that, I'm afraid.
Sorry, I've just got a quick question just to confirm. Is this to include recycling collection as well? Do you need that?
Only that happens under the existing provisions, which is very limited.
So just as what is existing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the latest amendment, sorry, Cyrus, I sent you about 4 emails this morning. The latest one is existing rubbish and recycling collection service for existing Yeah,
and can I also say that that I think, Councillor Fitzsimons, that you said that the community won't know about this, but my understanding was, and I wish I'd had a bit more time to read this more thoroughly, is this is about going out to consultation. So, this is about going out to consultation. This is not about springing something on the community.
Well.
Thank you. Councillor Foon.
Kia ora tātou, and thank you, Councillor Fitzsimons, and I fully appreciate that this is going to be a challenge, but I've also come to the decision that I cannot support this amendment either. Just as an employer, having been an employer myself and recognising the challenge for WCC as an employer, what I am hearing is all of our staff are saying that this system isn't working and perhaps someone else can do a better job to service the residents. And I think I've heard that our officers are bending over backwards to make sure that there is effective consultation and that solutions are sought with the challenging areas. Just as an employer, the health and safety and the logistics have been challenging for a very long time for our team, and I'm hearing that this is an important part of the bylaw, that we need to seek change for a better service and a safer service for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pennant.
So look, I'm going to support, but it's a line call. Like, it's a really big line call, because I do appreciate the advice of officers, and as I said, they're the experts in the operation of running rubbish and recycling. They have a lot of experience. So my concerns are, my concerns, but then I'll say why I've changed my mind. Look, I don't want this to be another cycleway. Change needs to happen, okay? It's not okay for people just to keep dumping their rubbish, sticking it on the footpath 50 bags high. Like, we have to do better. And saying that, I will say, of course, that we need to provide better infrastructure and support, and then I think people will do the right thing. I do think equity issues can be addressed. It's the same for every other environmental issue. If there are people who are literally struggling and they cannot afford it, there are ways of addressing that. I also look, do have a very strong concern around treating people equally, and that's why the amendments that I originally drafted were actually to say the provision should be given to everyone, whether you've got the service now or not. And so I do have an issue with saying we should give it to these people but not to these people. And I know there has been some advocacy for particular buildings, and that doesn't sit comfortably with me. But that, I will take some of the responsibility for that, because if we'd done a policy, we could have sorted through some of these issues. So that's kind of, that's why just doing a bylaw, big learning, is not enough. And I do, look, as someone who's held the portfolio, 3 worker deaths over the last decade in water and waste, I am not casual about safety. I am not casual. It is not acceptable to send the last one, a 20-year-old. It's not okay, and we have to do better. However, Councillor Matthews, it was you that swung me, because when we were having a discussion on Tuesday, as I said, my policy drive wasn't really about cleaning up the footpaths, although that is an issue. My policy drive is to reduce waste. And so Councillor Matthews said to me, sorry, I hope it's okay to quote you out of it, but I think it was helpful. Well, then that's not going to do it, because what we're doing is shoving people into the private market who are then going to do what they have been doing for the last decade, and that's not okay either. I don't actually have confidence in the waste companies as yet, although the licensing is definitely going to help. They need to come to the table and realise they can make money out of organics and recycling. Hopefully. So that's actually a really big problem. The privatisation has failed so in such a catastrophic way that I don't want to go back to that. So we want to bring people back to the council family. Come back to us, and we will do a better job. And I also just, again, sorry, institutional knowledge again, no one likes having a council service taken away from them. There will be a ruckus. Not that that's the reason why I do it, but there will be a ruckus, and it just doesn't work. I've just seen it happen too many times where we've taken things away. I think the mobile library, I wasn't around then, but that was quite tricky. And I think whilst people have voted with their feet, Councillor Fitzsimons through the chair, you might say that rubbish is a core service, but they've kind of gone, no, actually it's not, we're going to go to a private operator. But nevertheless, I think we should have a positive and proactive role in waste minimisation, and we should defend that very vigorously. And I would certainly be supportive of my colleagues who want to look at bringing waste services back in-house, because it just isn't working. So that is another line of discussion we need to have to figure out where the money would come from and all the rest of it. But waste does make quite a lot of money, so might be a way to offset our rates.
Kia ora. Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora. I want to start by I'll talk to the amendment and to the whole bylaw. I'm speaking in support of this amendment, obviously. I want to first of all thank officers for all of their work. I know, and previous councillors, who, the expertise that has gone into putting this bylaw before us today. I particularly want to acknowledge right next to me the lovely Councillor Foon, her focus and determination and integrity in this area are already seeing gains for our city in this area. And I have to say, the sort of image of lockdown of you with your tiny bag of rubbish on the front page of the paper is an inspiration for us all. Somehow you turned standing next to your rubbish bag into a fashion moment, Laurie. I guess the conversations about privatisation, as Councillor Pannett's kind of talked to, my concerns that if waste collection is left to the market, our abilities to influence will be minimal. And, in many, we're left with, decisions that were made over previous decades according to an outdated and failed ideology. And I do want us to do this work ourselves. It's a core service. It's integral to our climate goals. And I was interested to move an amendment to look at the feasibility of bringing this work back in-house. I've been dissuaded from doing this, I guess, by the need to focus on we've got to get stuff done. And I understand that focus, and I think Councillor Foon, has some really clear goals in terms of, zero waste and, especially in the area of organic collection, which I, very much support. And so I kind of understand the need to focus our minds. But I guess this amendment does help demonstrate clearly the direction of travel that we can go in, particularly with regards to multi-unit dwellings, that we don't want to give up further our kind of share of this service, and in fact we want to go the other way. And I wanted to reflect briefly on my own experience of apartment living, where we were, not problematic in terms of we weren't piling up the rubbish bags on the side of the road. We did have space to put our rubbish in recycling, and the space we had was a giant jumbo bin. And what we did, and everybody in this apartment building, just, it was old appliances, it was because massive objects could fit in our rubbish bin and we put them in there. And it really did, I think that we had a lot less focus, for my little household on our waste, because we weren't seeing it in that way. We weren't seeing our own, like Councillor Foon with the rubbish bag, because we would take it down daily and just add it to the enormous mountain of rubbish. So I guess my concern is for multi-unit dwellings, that we are just making the problems invisible to ourselves, and also, well, we're not, because we'll see it eventually, but also our ability to influence them. So it was hugely problematic from a waste minimisation perspective. And I guess I just want to add, regardless, I know we've talked about the serious health and safety issues, and but for whether you support this amendment or not, I just want to acknowledge the workforce that does this work, and that this we saw, especially during COVID, we recognised who we really needed in our lives, and how important this essential workers and everybody that does this work. My hat is off to you, and I'm so proud that where the council is associated, that we pay a living wage. But also we thank you and appreciate the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condie.
Kia ora, thank you everyone. I'm going to be foreshadowing that I'm going to bring an alternative amendment to Councillor Fitzsimons, which is that for his, if we look at 16 on the screen here, agree that the existing rubbish and recycling collection services for existing multi-use dwellings be retained for the period of 5 years where operationally feasible. This change in wording would still not be supported by officers. They still prefer the existing wording, but it is not opposed by officers. So they would still prefer that we go with the existing, the existing wording. But they feel like if with the addition of the phrase "where operationally feasible," that this becomes something that they can actually work with and implement. I completely understand and support Councillor Fitzsimons' concern here that we're taking away a service, and by extending this grandparenting period to...
I'm just going to remind you, you can't speak to your foreshadowed amendment now. You need to speak to... You've said what the tenor of it is, and then you go back to...
Thank you. Cool. So I totally support this idea that we should be trying to make sure that we grandparent in these multi-unit dwellings who are already are receiving services, and I understand the point of that amendment. But I will not be supporting this version of it because of the health and safety concerns that have been raised by officers. So I think that, it's... Yeah, I don't think I have anything more to say about it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolfe.
In 2011, our ward had its biggest public meeting, and it related to the private driveways and lanes having their services removed. It got me interested in council. His Worship the Mayor and Nori Best tried their absolute best to mitigate it and justify it and all that sort of stuff, and the officers as well, but they were completely in the firing line. I have never seen so many elderly people mobilised. people that would not be able to get their rubbish to the end of their driveways. I also noted that doctors spoke about the public health issues because they'd heard, and it came up at the meeting, that people would dump their rubbish rather than try and get it to the end of a driveway. This is not dissimilar, and I'm sorry, Councillor Condi, but I can't agree with your foreshadow because it just delays a controversy. I'd like to take this off the table. You know, I'm absolutely agreeing with Councillor Fitzsimons. This is imperative that we don't delay angst to people. We have ratepayers, and the equality of that, which Councillor Pannett brought up, I think, is something that's really, really important. I think that I've probably said enough, but it got me interested in council in 2011, and the very next day we backed down. Council backed down the very next day after that meeting because they could see, Mike Mendonça could see that there was there would be a big, huge problem, and that some of our most vulnerable people were being affected.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak to it now too, and I think Councillor Wolfe is absolutely right that there are health and safety issues that exist if we stop collecting this from the perspective of the residents who will struggle to potentially know how to manage their rubbish in a time when we won't necessarily have a solution, but also people become very creative when it comes to solving the issue themselves, and we may just move the problem to other places where people go and dump their bags next to someone else's outside their house, or people do find solutions to problems that don't always help us in the long term anyway. So I think I really do want to thank you, Councillor Fitzsimons, for thinking about this, because this is really challenging, and I can see the challenges for the officers around, how we do solve this problem and how we do protect our staff, which is very important. But I think just trying to take a blanket approach like this is very hard, very risky, and we will potentially not end up coming out on top of it anyway. So next person is Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You did remind me of my old varsity days when 8 of us lived in a 4-bedroom place, and we did indeed move the bags. Happy memories. I will be supporting this amendment for all the reasons that people have mentioned. I was interested in Councillor Condi's foreshadowed amendment, but where I come out, and I think that we would be better off engaging with those communities who are currently stockpiling their bags and trying to figure out what solutions might be available rather than legislating for it. So as a consequence, I won't support the foreshadowed amendment.
Councillor Calvert, would you like to speak to this now?
And look, I'll speak to the substantive generally as well. We're going out to consultation. We've got to keep it simple. We've got to get people, if we really want to go out to consult with people, we've got to make sure that we are clear about what will happen. It's the old change management, what's going to change for me. So we need to be quite clear that people understand this. And I think when we start looking at it, what will be the impact on our ratepayers and our residents, and thinking it from their perspective, not what might be easier for us. I'm supporting this amendment and seconding this amendment because I think there is a large part of our people in Wellington who have bought properties, rented properties in multi-unit developments. And if we change the rules on them, when those services are already there, what else can we change? Just because it's more effective from an officer perspective or combining in with the region. Because what we're here is for the people. And I think we just need to remember that. And we're their representatives. Councillor Pennant, mentioned about, we've set the the law before the rules, before the policy. You know, if we've been able to look at the policy first and actually understood how many people are going to be directly affected, what were their concerns, rather than just leave it to a final consultation phase where many of them won't even see it in the document. And it reminds me. When I was out a month or so ago. With the police around COVID-19 enforcement, and their approach was we educate and engage first before we go to enforcement, and I think that's a real big part for us. If you take this one aspect out of this, the whole waste bylaw is quite is massive. There's going to be enough change already that we generally approve of, without picking a fight on something small. And isn't this about transitional change as well, and bringing people along with us rather than using that big stick? And if you look at local government legislation, it says solid waste collection and disposal is identified as a core service within local government. That's what people want. That's what people pay rates for. And if we say, no, we don't want to do that here because, we've changed the rules, then we need to have a viable alternative. And expecting people who probably don't even know their neighbours to sort of get into an agreement is we're pushing it back onto them. Do we even know the cost of all what we want to enforce? Well, we don't even really understand what that is, and I think we can put our resources and efforts into other more significant parts of the bylaw. And for me, one of the key things I'm reason to support this is that I think if we allow this amendment not to go through, we're really just abdicating our responsibility in this area. And in terms of our health and safety, look, we have fantastic systems. We've got a real solid health and safety system. And I believe that we have the system in place that we can manage any risks if there are. And then that comes back to engaging and educating as well with people. Because at the end of the day, most people don't want to make anything unsafe for others. So I'm really keen to support this. I think adding in anything extra is just playing with words, because it's really about the essence. What we're saying is, look, we are not going to enforce a different set of rules on multi-unit developments that are already in place. Fine, make the changes for those ones that are being developed now and in the future, but those existing ones, you've expected a service, you paid your rates for that service, you continue to pay your rates for that service, and you've got every right to expect that. And as my understanding is this bylaw is reviewed after 5 years anyway. If there's a change, or 10. But I'll tell you what, knowing our resources, it's going to be a big ask just to manage the other part of it. And so look, but generally I support the majority of the document or bylaw going out for consultation with this amendment.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to very briefly speak in support of Councillor Fitzsimmons' amendment, and to put this as a challenge that we still have a really big opportunity to influence multi-unit dwellings and new existing contracts, and we can still find more and more ways to work within an existing service. This was raised earlier in the week, but for a lot of our people in our own social housing blocks, and for a lot of the people of my ward, when they pay their rates bill, the thing that they directly see as a service of Wellington City Council, the clearest thing, even like children recognise that council collects the rubbish. And for me, making sure that service is kept in-house and not privatised, and also the advantage for a lot of our own tenants in our own social housing, as well as multi-unit dwelling occupants, is that our own rubbish and waste bags are subsidised to the point they're not subsidised. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't, if that recycling is privatised, isn't it kind of likely that that service will be more expensive though? Yeah, I think that's what I was referring to, is if with council there's certainty, but in putting that in the hands of privatisation, it's more likely that people can be taken advantage of and not kept publicly accountable as well. Yeah, and those were my only points. But yeah, I will be supporting this thing.
Thank you. Just if you can just wait there a second. We're just making sure standing orders work with the process that we're going through. We'll now go to your right of reply, Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for your considered input, and I guess I have in a Andy Foster-like style taken notes about everyone's comments, and I have to say. But I'll try and keep it brief, I promise. I guess this, my starting point, I just want to say, acknowledge your concerns, Deputy Mayor Free, around taking officer advice seriously, and I do agree that we need to do that, but sometimes there are political decisions which are about levels of service, and those are key political decisions that we need to make, and sometimes we need to be in the uncomfortable position of not accepting officer advice. And I did just want to also acknowledge Councillor Foon and others who have raised very serious health and safety issues, and I wouldn't want anyone to think that by proposing this bylaw or councillors supporting it, that there is any message that we don't take health and safety anything but extremely seriously. But the reality is, and the experience of workers in New Zealand, is not that the best way to ensure their health and safety is to privatise services. In fact, the opposite is true. So I absolutely reject notions that this will not allow health and safety to be at the forefront of decision making, and regardless of what this amendment says and the bylaw says, there is a very serious duty on the Chief Executive and on every one of us to take health and safety seriously. Now that might mean that we need to do things differently, but regardless of whether it's us collecting the waste or someone else, health and safety issues will arise and need to be investigated and managed and resourced to be done properly. I also did just want to raise the point that you made, Deputy Mayor Free, around this is only consultation. You know, people can engage in the consultation and give us their feedback, so we don't need this amendment. I think the problem with that is that we know no matter how good we do our engagement, that it doesn't reach everybody. And what happens is services get taken away, people get upset, and then the council gets a bad name. So I guess I appreciate that there is consultation and good steps can be made, but it's very difficult to get the attention of the residents who are going to be affected by this. I just wanted to pick up on some of the points people have made about rates. This is, as Councillor Pennett's outlined, it's not so much an issue around rates, it is a user-pays service, but it is something that, regardless of the reality, ratepayers associate with council, and they do associate buying their bags and their rubbish being collected with the council. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Matthews. I lived in an apartment in Courtney Place for about 15 years, and we had a giant skip in the basement, and you didn't think as carefully about your waste with the skip there as you do with a council rubbish bag. I just know that to be a psychological reality. And I guess I just wanted to briefly comment on this business around operationally possible. So it's happening now, so I reject the arguments that it's not operationally possible, but I absolutely accept that it might not be happening in the very best way now, and we may need to work through different ways to do it. And this amendment's really saying we will continue the service, and it may need to change, that the exact precise way that it operates may need to change a bit, and that we're up for that, but the key thing is that the service remains. And I just thought it was interesting that Simon Wolf got on this council because of the rubbish. So in some ways, if we want more Simon Wolf, we should vote down this bylaw so that we have the public meetings that bring out these people. But thank you, everyone.
Goes in. Yes. So thank you for your right of reply, and we will now put this to the vote. So that is carried, and we will take a division. So we'll just take a photo. We're living in a modern world. Oh, can you? Oh, you can see it there. Oh, it's on your screen now. We got that recorded. Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to return to the substantive. Because it's only if it fails. Sorry, we're going back to the substantive motion. Councillor Wolfe.
Yeah, I thought I'd wait until that vote occurred before I would get in and really thank Laurie. Iona's probably said all that I was going to say, because it is a joy to have you here, Laurie, and you're one of the most creative, pragmatic people that I've come across on this council so far. I'm looking forward to seeing how you create some interesting incentives for waste minimalisation and particularly encouraging recycling. So don't be deterred by what just happened. You know, like it happens around the table sometimes, and I just today I've really admired the debate and the passion as well. Our offices in this area, you guys are amazing. Pre-election, I spent quite a bit of time at the Southern Landfill in particular, and also out at Porora at Spices, and the way that our staff operates in that area, and particularly the two recycling areas. Laurie and I, we've already decided we want to encourage what goes on there and make more effort to use the skills and the talents that are very much in our organisation. So we're off to Spices tomorrow, Laurie and I, because there's a guy out there that's got a really great idea that we want to hear. It's one of our, I think that area is Porora, but it's also us as well, and you know, like it's really important that we take rubbish, waste minimalisation and recycling really it's an absolute priority. And lastly, and I say this each and every time we have a consultation, this is a consultation document, and we need people to get in there and consult and engage, and this is the first part of it, and I think that's been very healthy. Once again.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Deputy Mayor Free.
Look, I understand that this would be a difficult decision, and to vote for a time frame that people could actually see and understand, like 2 years, 5 years. But in some ways, I really feel that this has kicked the can down the road, and it's all very well to say, you know, I'm happy to vote for this policy, but I'm still disappointed that we've basically kicked the hardest part of the can down the road. And what I actually heard was that people were afraid to stand up. Is it a point of order? I don't think so. It is a little bit galling because we have some hard decisions to make. And I honestly think if we're going to make some change, there are going to be some tough decisions. And here we are, failed. And it's a little bit galling to me.
Point of order, Madam Chair, we've had this debate.
No, it's not a point of order, but we'll just try.
Yeah.
We will try
I'll
to keep
finish
it moving.
off there.
We have debated that particular.
I know. But I just think we've got to, at some point, take the tough decisions, and they actually have to be time bound. They can't just be 10 years down the track. And I hope that the residents actually are braver than we are, and they come back on this consultation and tell us that actually they can stomach this and they're looking for some change.
I'll just briefly speak to the substantive as well. I guess just to respond to that, I think the thing is we do need to have tough decisions. We do need to make tough decisions, but we don't need to target them to particular groups, and that's the big challenge with trying to deal with a situation that is very complicated. Some privatised service and public makes it incredibly hard to work out how to find those controls. And I did often wonder before lockdown what it would be like if you just said to everybody you're going to have to manage your own rubbish and your property, whatever that looks like. And that would immediately have quite a big result. And it was quite interesting because lockdown kind of caused that to happen, where people saying, I haven't got room to store my recycling, I haven't got room to hold on to my rubbish or whatever. And you think, okay, so the reality is we've actually created a system which makes it really easy to produce waste and to just forget about it. And obviously we've heard about the apartment perspective, but my husband and I, when we were first married, we had a big rubbish bin and we looked at it completely differently to how we do now, and we don't have a big rubbish bin anymore, we use the bags. But to start with, it was all about value for money and getting as much as you could into that bin. So, we're all going through a transition. I think the key thing is, and that's why it is fantastic having Councillor Foon, who is leading the way by doing it, which is really important, and I want to acknowledge that, because I think the biggest thing is that we actually do have to try and make our own change individually, and often people will say it's too hard. What does my little bit really make a difference in the big scheme of things? But it actually does, and that's what this really needs to be about, is we all need to make a difference. But I do think we need to make sure that we do challenge people. So I really appreciate the fact that councillors are willing to be bold and to make difficult decisions. And I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Pennant, who has been waving this flag for a very long time. You've got people waving alongside you, so I hope you feel that support, and I'm appreciative of the fact that you have done things in the past to try and get this on the right track, and acknowledge how hard it is to make change when people like convenience. Councillor Condi.
I just wanted to speak about the operator licensing, because I think this is such an important part of the bylaw and really an exciting step forward, because the reality is that most of our rubbish services in the city have been privatised, and they are carried out by private companies. Now, I don't have a particular ideological problem with that, and I know that there are councils who no longer provide any council rubbish services. Kapiti Coast, all of it's entirely privatised, and the council's role is entirely as a regulator. The great thing about these operator licensing is that it means that we actually have the power to do a bit more of that regulation that we don't actually have at the moment. So we're bringing in some levers for us to pull as a council over the private operators and how they behave, and we get to get some of that lovely data that Councillor Pennant was talking about before, to plug some of our gaps in the data, because it's really hard to minimise what we don't actually know how much there is at the moment. So that's going to be a really important part of it as well. So I'm really excited that 8 territorial authorities have managed to work together and come to a bylaw. Like, that is just properly amazing. And so it's just a great process, and congratulate Councillor Pennant and Councillor Foon for the long work on this. Thank you.
Right of reply.
Ooh.
Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. I do just want to address a couple of things. Privatisation. Actually, guys, get real. Private organisations are actually ahead of the council on making change. Not necessarily our waste companies, but if you go into the private sector, they are doing really amazing things. It's government and councils that are lagging behind. So that's a general statement, but I do just want to say that they are working hard at this. I just want to us to remember that, yes, this bylaw, I want to acknowledge the call about the policy. I think that is absolutely correct. I think that would be a really supportive document in the process, and it's something that we need. And this is just one of the prongs, a reminder of that. But the real opportunity is around incentives and initiatives and systems that we put in place to support our community to do the right thing. Because the big issue is that we don't want waste at all. We want fully reusable systems. And 10 years from now, the whole system might look completely different, rather than just putting your waste out in a bag. For example, at the moment, I'm taking bottles back everywhere because it's just a return scheme. So I'm actually, the stopping of recycling is actually the thing that we possibly need to aspire to. And that seems hard to comprehend now, but that is the reality going forward. Council is not the only thing. The government has a big part to play, and the levy rise will have a massive impact on all the business opportunities that will fall out of the massive increase that all the cheap price of waste is having on what's coming in through our landfill. So also the product stewardship scheme. Imagine producing a product, but you have to be responsible for it right the way through the chain. And these are things that the government is asking producers to do. I do just want to thank Councillor Paul for bringing the amendments around emissions measuring. That's possibly, one of the biggest, apart from the bylaw itself, that's a really exciting thing that will help us understand. It's a basic thing. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so this is a really exciting thing about this bylaw. So yes, I will conclude by just thanking our team again for the hard work and the efficient work. And I do want us to be reminded that the operations team are always complemented by everyone that uses Wellington City Landfill. Our team do a great job down there. In fact, I'd like to call it the safest and cleanest little landfill in the world. That's kind of what I'm going to be aiming for. Okay. So I do look forward to bringing the consultation back to the table, hearing what everybody has to say, working alongside the other 7 councils in the region to understand their challenges. And yes, I look forward to doing that all with you today, and I look forward to your support on putting this bylaw through so that our team can take it to the next stage. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you very much. So we'll now put this to the vote. So 11 and 14 have just been removed because they were superseded by the amendment by Councillor Fitzsimons. Well, people are voting already. Yeah, do you want a division to show the whole paper? Cool. Unanimous. Very good. Thank you. Alrighty, so that brings us kua mutu tēnei hui. So what we'll do now is we will all e tū for the karakia mutunga. Unu hia ki te uru tapu nui. Kia wātia, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatū. Koia rā e rongo, whakaeria ake ki runga, kia wātia, kia wātia. Obviously you haven't quite memorised it yet. Kia pai tō ahi ahi. Thank you everybody.